He merges with the beast, power explodes, and the battlefield shakes. A legendary wolf turns to dust. But how did an E-rank hunter become the last hope against gods? To understand this twist, come back with me to the start. Suho feels the weight of a destiny he cannot yet decipher. A dark voice from the shadows whispers, "It's been a while, young monarch." He recognizes that silhouette. It was his own father. Suho had a dream, vivid as a real-life video game, where he fought and leveled up without rest. Long before, absolute entities, the supreme beings, created the universes. They sought eternal life by forging souls and immutable laws. But time brought boredom to these immortal gods. So, they found a cruel way to entertain themselves, throwing their own creations into endless wars. Billions died and were reborn, mere entertainment for these entities. But something changed. A creator was killed by their own creature. Beings from other dimensions gathered to observe the resulting chaos. There was no lament for the death, only greed for the empty throne. A covetous thought permeated every cosmic heart. Whoever seized that unclaimed power would be the new king. The dispute for cosmic control began right there, in the void. Meanwhile, on Earth, life seemed to follow a common course. Suho proudly announces that he got into the National University of Arts. His classmates don't believe him, skeptical, and accuse him of lying. How did someone as crude as you get into an art college? They say, amidst laughter. An acquaintance, Sungchul, approaches to congratulate the young man. He asks when Suho started drawing, but is quickly cut off. "I'm not Kim Sungchul, I'm Lee Yunchul," corrects the bully. Yunchul complains, Suho ruined his plans to dominate the school. The girls around find his attitude too childish. Suho ignores the provocation, focused on his own path. Suddenly, Yunchul loses his patience and lunges, screaming his name. The punch comes fast, but Suho moves with fighting instinct. "Let's just live in peace until graduation," Suho whispers. The boy's gaze changes, becoming cold as ice. He intercepts the attack and retaliates with terrifying force. The bully is shocked by the speed of the counterattack. Suho feels a strange energy coursing through his fist. Yunchul tries to act tough, saying it didn't hurt at all. But Suho's next blow is decisive and brutal. The surrounding students watch the scene, not understanding what happened. Yunchul is slammed against the lockers with a crash. The bully can barely process how easily he was defeated. Suho merely walks away, maintaining his silence and high guard. He knows his strength is not normal for a human. Sung Suho is now a sophomore university student, but destiny has much darker plans for him. A staff member announces that classes have moved to another building for safety. The warning is clear. Hunters are entering to eliminate monsters. The guards comment that the portal is rank D and should close soon. They ask everyone to stay away, as the situation is dangerous. Suho observes the dimensional rift with a bad feeling. 3 years ago, portals changed the world forever. Creatures emerged from them to hunt humans and spread chaos. But humanity awakened mana users, called hunters. Wu Jinchul created the association to organize these warriors and bring order. The world is now divided between awakened and non-awakened. Suho sits down to draw, but his mind is elsewhere. There are those who crawl like ants, and others who take whatever they want. The ants soon realize that human effort has a limit. A common human will never reach even the weakest rank E. Without the hunters, the world would be destroyed in mere days. Most people are grateful for the protection of these heroes. However, Suho feels a restlessness that keeps him from sleeping. He thinks of his missing parents and his own weakness. The feeling of powerlessness fills the void left in his chest. He wonders what his father would do in this situation. A familiar voice seems to call his name from the back of his mind. The art teacher praises the young man's focus on today's drawing. Looking closer, the teacher asks if that is an ant. Suho finds the drawing of an ant human that he himself drew unsettling. The image reminds him of Beru, the shadow monster he once knew. Outside, the association's support team awaits their return. The crowd cheers excitedly, seeing the hunters emerge from the gate. They seem relaxed, indicating the mission was a success. Hunter Kim announces the gate has been cleared, but something feels off. He reports encountering a type of monster never seen before. It was a humanoid creature that spat blue flames from its eyes. The monster attacked with claws, but didn't seem to cause much damage. Kim thinks it was nothing, but the record is necessary. Suddenly, the hunter's body begins to tremble violently. His expression turns terrifying in a single second. Blood splatters and blue flames erupt from within him. Everyone around erupts into absolute panic at the transformation. Hunter Kim is no longer human. He has become a monster. He charges his own team with a blind thirst for blood. Horror spreads as the massacre begins before everyone's eyes. The blue flames are the same ones he described in his report. The ground becomes covered with those who couldn't escape. Screams of agony echo throughout the university area. Suho feels the danger approaching ever faster. People desperately ask what is happening here. The reality of the massacre hits the students full force. Humans possessed by the flames begin to brutally attack each other. Many believe a dungeon break is occurring. Some try to flee, while others prefer to wait for the heroes. They beg for even a rank E instructor to do something. Suho realizes no one will come to save them in time. A headless monster engulfed in a blue aura appears in the corridor. The creature is pure destructive energy and advances without hesitation. "Run! Get out of here now!" someone screams desperately. The monster throws students around like rag dolls. The beast's roar makes the window panes vibrate. Terror seizes every face present in that room. Suho tries to organize the escape, but the chaos is overwhelming. A classmate collapses, her legs frozen stiff with fear. She pleads for help as the monster slowly draws closer. Suho runs to get help, but the weight of guilt strikes him. He knows that leaving her behind is condemning her to certain death. He despises being an unawakened, powerless to do anything about it. Amidst the despair, a familiar shadow appears in his mind. The dormant power begins to stir, showing signs of life. Suho's gaze shines with a fierce, newfound determination. The monster roars, ready to deliver the final blow to the girl. She closes her eyes, bracing for the worst impact of her life. Tears stream down her face as the monster raises its sharp claws. A scream tears through the air as the beast lunges for the kill. But something interrupts the attack in the last millisecond. Suho places himself between the beast and his defenseless classmate. He thinks that if his father were here, he would fight. An intense light explodes, and time seems to stop all around. A system notification appears. Secret Quest Courage of the Week completed. He sees his father's silhouette asking if the game was fun. Suho is confused by the question about the game and the dream. "Father? Is that really you?" he asks in disbelief. He realizes that his father's image is his source of strength. He had always wanted to understand how his father became so powerful. Now he is in the same unbelievable situation as his progenitor. The monster roars again, but Suho no longer feels fear. He charges at the creature with a fire extinguisher. Suho decides he will act exactly as his father would. The impact of the object against the beast's head is deafening. He knows ordinary weapons don't work, but he had to try. The creature recoils, surprised by the audacity of the common human. His classmate watches everything, incredulous at Suho's courage. The system shines brighter before the young man's eyes. The message asks if he accepts to become a player. He levels up instantly and feels the strength flowing. There's no reason to refuse this power amidst such despair. Suho accepts the contract and his destiny is sealed. A blue aura begins to envelop the young man's body. The status window appears, confirming that he has awakened. The enemy ahead is identified as a Mistburn rank D. The beast burns with blue flames, ready to consume everything. Suho tells the girl to run while he holds off the monster. He analyzes the opponents, 2 unawakened and 1 transformed hunter. If this awakening is real, he will be able to win this fight. Power surges through his veins like an electric current. Suho prepares for the first real combat of his life. He dashes towards the first Mistburn with insane speed. A powerful punch lands squarely on the monster's stomach. The creature is flung far by the impact of the physical blow. "Sorry about that," he says coldly. The monster falls defeated before it even understands the attack. Suho stares at his own hands, surprised by his newfound power. The system confirms he defeated the enemy with a single blow. He advances to the next, giving it no time to react. Another enemy is struck down by the brute force of the new player. The mission reward appears, floating in the air for him. He confirms that the awakening is real and accepts the rewards. Suho smiles, feeling that now he has a chance to survive. But the transformed rank D hunter is still standing. He's impressed that the beast withstood his first punch. The fight escalates, and their blows begin to tear apart the classroom. The Mistburn attacks with claws enveloped in deadly blue mana. Suho groans in pain as he's hit by a glancing blow. He realizes the monster is much faster than it seems. If he's seriously wounded, he might end up transforming too. He needs to end this before the infection spreads. He remembers seeing a longevity status in the previous window. This might be the key to resisting the beast's attacks. If he loses to a rank D, he's still just a rank E. The thought of being weak infuriates him and makes his mana boil. Suho decides to risk everything on a sudden attribute boost. He spends his points and his strength rises to level 14. The monster roars, but Suho is already moving to attack. The two collide in the center of the room in an explosion of energy. The exchange of blows is too fast for a human eye to follow. Even with increased strength, the beast still resists his attacks. He puts all remaining points into strength, reaching level 19. Suho's fist glows, and he unleashes all his power on the monster. Suho's fist tears through the monster's chest with devastating force. He focuses all his energy into the final blow as the creature shatters. The shockwave sweeps through the classroom, throwing dust and debris everywhere. The impact is so violent that the walls crack under the pressure. Suho can barely breathe from the exertion, but he doesn't stop the attack. He slams the corrupted enemy against the concrete until nothing remains. Pieces of armor fly through the air like grenade shrapnel. Suho stares into the void where the monster once stood, his eyes still gleaming. The floor gives way beneath his feet due to the sheer power of his last punch. He slowly retreats, feeling the weight of his first real victory. Silence finally returns to the destroyed college hallway. Suho looks at his own hands, still trembling from the adrenaline. The Mistburn vanishes into ashes, leaving only a trail of destruction. Suho wipes the sweat from his face and tries to catch his breath. He leans against the wall and whispers to himself, I won. Exhaustion hits hard, but a new sensation begins to emerge. He clenches his fist with determination and thinks, with this, I am an awakened one too. The realization finally dawns on him. The world has changed for him. He rises with difficulty, resolute. I can do this now. I can save people. Each step he takes now is firm, ignoring the ache in his muscles. He looks out the window and sees that the chaos outside is far worse. Explosions of blue mana illuminate the art college campus. Suho wonders, what's the real situation out there? But before he can leave, a gigantic shadow crosses his path. An awakened C-rank Mistburn appears, far more dangerous than the others. The pressure emanating from this beast makes the air heavy and hard to breathe. The monster roars, making the building's windows violently vibrate. Meanwhile, the city's loudspeakers blare an emergency warning. The voice announces, "Dungeon break at the college. All civilians must evacuate immediately." Soldiers on the front lines watch the carnage, powerless to do anything. One of them complains angrily, "Damn it, people are dying and all we can do is watch." The other replies that the association is taking too long to send B-rank hunters. They check the local hunters' files and fear the worst. One of the names on the list is Kim Jong-soo, a C-rank tank who has been infected. Suho stares at the new beast, frozen. What is that? Did it come up from downstairs? He notices that this monster has a weapon, something unheard of until now. Suho hesitates for a second. I just leveled up. Do I even stand a chance? He prepares to fight, but his instincts scream danger. The C-rank Mistburn lunges forward at a speed Suho can barely keep up with. Suho barely has time to react before the first blow lands. He narrowly escapes and thinks, this is insane. The difference in strength is enormous. The monster strikes the ground, creating a crater where Suho had just been. Suho is thrown backward by nothing but the sheer air displacement of the attack. He feels that a single direct hit could spell his definitive end. The wind slices at his face as he tries to reposition himself in the room. Suho starts running, realizing he cannot win this fight head-on. He despairs. There's no way to face something like this. I need to hold out until reinforcements arrive. The monster chases Suho, demolishing the building's pillars in its path. The beast's blue eyes glow with a terrifying thirst for blood. It prepares its giant sword for a strike that will collapse the entire hallway. Suho looks back and realizes he's cornered. He screams, "No way!" as the blade descends towards him. On the adjacent rooftop, terrified girls cry for help. The hunters will be here soon, right? The monster spots the civilians and shifts its target to them. Suho witnesses the scene, and fear gives way to icy fury. The beast leaps towards the students, ready for a massacre. Suho grinds his teeth and makes a suicidal decision. His eyes glow with the same intense light as his father's. He growls, "Damn it, there's no time to wait for anyone." Suho leaps into its path, placing himself between the monster and the civilians. He yells to himself, "I have to stop this guy now." The C-rank beast lets out a roar that makes the ground tremble beneath Suho. Suho knows he's on the edge. One hit and I'm dead, but I can't let it pass. He sees the fallen body of a classmate, and his blood boils over. "I won't let you kill anyone else," he roars, charging forward. The two collide, and the impact shatters all the surrounding windows. Suho tries to strike the monster, but its armor is like solid steel. He's hit by a powerful side punch that makes him spit blood. Even dazed, Suho refuses to fall and continues fighting. He dodges a thrust that punches through the concrete wall. The monster is too fast, cornering Suho in a dead end. The beast prepares its final blow with its sword wreathed in blue flames. Suho tries to block, but is violently thrown against the debris. The monster walks unhurriedly, knowing its prey is wounded. Suho groans in pain. "Kuh! My body won't obey me anymore." The beast raises its weapon to deliver the mercy blow to Suho. He coughs blood, feeling life slowly draining away. The blow descends, tearing through the air and ground with a dull thud. A system window appears with a critical warning, HP 1 of 140. Suho smiles weakly. 1 HP. I'm lucky. The system still wants me alive. The rank C monster prepares to attack again, without mercy. Suho tries to stand, but his arms tremble and fail. Suddenly, the surrounding air begins to vibrate with dark energy. The beast recoils instinctively, sensing a much stronger presence emerging. Suho sees his fatigue status reach its maximum, and his vision darkens. He collapses to the ground, unable to continue the battle alone. The monster roars at the shadow beginning to engulf the room. Purple cracks appear in space, as if reality itself is shattering. A sound of shattering glass echoes as the rift fully opens. A monstrous, black claw emerges from the absolute darkness. The mistburn is hurled away by an invisible, overwhelming force. An explosion of dark mana fills the entire university floor. Suho looks up, confused by what is happening. An imposing silhouette forms behind him, protecting his fallen body. A monstrous voice whispers, "No!" with a tone of pure hatred. Suho blames himself in thought. All this because I was too slow. The shadow creature stares at the rank C monster with disdain. It snarls at the enemies. "You must be the pests who dared to lay a hand on his highness," roars the royal shadow. With a swift movement, the rank C monster is slammed against the ground. Somewhere distant, a long-haired man observes the scene. Another monster tries to attack a defenseless janitor in the hallway. The man screams desperately for someone to save him. "Someone, please!" he cries before closing his eyes. A hooded figure appears and decapitates the monster in a second. The mysterious hunter moves like a blur among the enemies. Each of his blows is surgical, eliminating the beasts effortlessly. He protects civilians while clearing the campus of the infestation. That warrior's speed is something beyond human comprehension. He stops amidst the carnage, observing the trail of blood. His presence is comforting to the students who survived. He looks in Suho's direction, sensing something familiar. The army begins to regain control of the external areas of the campus. Wounded are carried to ambulances in an atmosphere of mourning. The damage to the art college is visible in every destroyed building. The soldiers are still on alert, fearing a new monster outbreak. They find the remains of the monsters and are shocked by the force used. The hooded figure disappears into the shadows before being identified. He leaves behind a silent battlefield filled with bodies. Suho begins to have visions of when he was just a small child. He sees himself drawing in a notebook on the floor of his old home. Toys and monster drawings surround little Suho in those memories. He looks at a specific drawing of a giant ant and smiles. A real shadow creature watches the boy draw, curious. The monster asks, emotional, "Little monarch, are you drawing me?" The shadow cries tears of joy, noticed by its master's son. Suho slowly opens his eyes, smelling the sterile scent of a hospital. He lies in a bed, bandages covering his entire body. Doctors and nurses move busily around the room. He realizes he survived what felt like his ultimate end. His uncle bursts into the room, shouting, "Suho, what happened? Are you okay?" Suho tries to reassure him. "I'm fine, uncle. I just need to rest a little." On the television, the presenter reports on the university massacre. He explains about the mist burns and the association's delayed reaction. Veteran hunters comment on the case with expressions of pure concern. They claim all the monsters died by an unknown force. A student reports that the monsters exploded on their own right in front of him. Suho switches off the TV, knowing the truth is far crazier. He looks at his own hands, feeling that the power is still there. Just as I suspected, my awakening wasn't a dream. He wonders how he survived a rank C threat, and a voice answers him. A small, shadowy ant emerges from the foot of Suho's bed. Beru bows solemnly and says, "It's been a long time, little monarch." Suho stares at the creature, and childhood memories flash back like lightning. Beru begins to cry. "You've grown so much. I'm overflowing with emotion." Suho realizes the puzzle pieces are finally falling into place. He looks at the ant and says calmly, "I know you." He remembers Beru was one of the shadows who looked after him as a child. Beru explains, "I crossed dimensions just to find you again." Suho wants to know why he lived with monsters and where his parents went. He notices Beru is small, and the insect complains it used too much mana. Suho laughs upon seeing the system call Beru soldier rank. Soldier rank? Beru becomes furious. "How dare you call me a soldier? I am martial rank." Suho thanks him for the healing, and Beru boasts about being an excellent healer. The shadow says it came to break Suho's seal, but he already did it himself. Beru reveals that everything Suho thought was a dream was real. He explains that Sung Jin-woo sealed his son's powers so he could have a normal life. Suho goes into shock. "My father? So he didn't abandon us?" Beru quickly corrects him. "He didn't leave home. He went into outer space." An image of the universe flares in Suho's mind, revealing the scale of the conflict. Beru begins to explain the war raging beyond the stars. Suho tries to process the information that his father is a warrior god. He asks softly, "Is my father protecting the entire world all by himself?" Beru confirms, "Yes, against the Itarim, the gods from outer space." He says the Itarim are sending apostles to invade Earth. Suho remains silent for a long time, absorbing the full weight of his destiny. "And my mother? Did she go with him?" Suho asks, a sliver of hope in his voice. Beru hesitates, and the atmosphere in the hospital room turns cold and tense. The insect lets out a cry of pain upon learning that Hyen has also disappeared. Beru panics. "Miss Hyen is gone? The Itarim must have set a trap." Suho lowers his head. "So my parents can't return because of this?" Beru assures him, "You can save her, but you must grow stronger first." Suho looks at Beru with a determination he'd never felt before. Beru extends his hand and says seriously, "Let us level up, little monarch." A black key materializes in Suho's hand, the key to the shadow dungeon. Beru gives the final instruction, "Insert this key into your own shadow." Suho obeys, and the key sinks into the ground, opening a portal to his new destiny. The dry click of the key echoes as Suho plunges it into his own shadow. A flash of black energy tears through the hospital floor. Beru vibrates with the transition. "Go forth and claim the power that is yours, little monarch." Suho's gaze sharpens before the unknown. He hesitates for a brief second, pondering the weight of this choice. but the hope of reuniting with his parents speaks louder than fear. With a firm step, he crosses the threshold between worlds. Beru watches in silence, remembering his master's orders. In a distant memory, Sung Jin-woo orders Suho's seals to be broken. The danger of the Itarim is approaching Earth, and the boy needs to be ready. The Shadow Monarch trusts in his own son's raw potential. Beru decides he will guide the young one's growth with complete devotion. The insect's shadowy form stirs in the void between dimensions. He swears to protect the air with his very existence. I shall stand by your side and oversee your ascension. The portal emits a deep, electrifying hum. The light consumes everything around it in a violent crackle. Suho feels the ground shift beneath his feet as the mist dissipates. Beru warns that this is the realm of the dead, where the living are forbidden. The emerging scenery is desolate and charged with a heavy energy. Ruins of a forgotten civilization stretch as far as the eye can see. Suho walks cautiously, feeling the air pressure decrease. No one enters here without the permission of this place's master. He observes the destroyed buildings and the sinister vegetation consuming the walls. Suho frowns. Is this the Shadow Dungeon? It looks more like a city in ruins. A strange sensation begins to bubble in his chest. Every step taken on the cracked streets seems to awaken something dormant. Suho stops, trying to understand why it all feels so familiar. Beru warns him to stay alert, for he must survive there for 4 hours. A hoarse, malicious voice emerges from the shadows. The time of suffering has arrived. A green figure leaps from a destroyed building with a weapon in hand. The goblin attacks with fury, but Suho reacts purely on instinct. The boy narrowly escapes, surprised by the creature's speed. It's just a goblin scout, a low-level threat. Beru explains that if there's one scout, the rest of the horde is nearby. Suho advances fearlessly, leaving the Ant King worried by such audacity. The monster's name has no color, a sign that it's weaker than him. The goblin attempts a desperate blow, but the fight is already over. Suho disarms the enemy with brutal efficiency. A system notification confirms he obtained a stone axe. With a swift blow, the monster's life is extinguished on the concrete floor. "That's one down," says Suho, wiping sweat from his face. He understands the system's logic. Colored names are those that pose a real danger. But before he can rest, the sound of multiple footsteps echoes. Another scout observes from afar, and he's not alone. The monster lets out a sharp warning cry to its pack. The Centurions emerge, spearheading the goblin's elite forces. The monster army surrounds Suho in the blink of an eye. Suho asks for help, but Beru refuses, not wanting to steal his experience. "So you're useless now," the boy grumbles, preparing himself. Suho smiles, deciding to test his newfound strength against the horde. The first goblin leaps, but Suho has already anticipated its move. He strikes with precision, tearing through the air and the enemy's flesh. The monsters attack in groups, attempting to overwhelm him with numbers. Suho feels a different energy flowing through his fingers. It's the ruler's authority skill, acting like an invisible hand. The system details the power that allows him to move objects without touching them. Suho uses the technique to pull and hurl the goblin's weapons. Archers emerge on the rooftops, firing venomous arrows at him. "You can have this back," Suho says, catching the arrow mid-air. The projectile returns with double the force, embedding itself in the archer's forehead. Beru recalls that Suho wielded this power since he was a babe, like a legend. But in that peaceful world, such strength was merely seen as a nuisance. Now, within the dungeon, this destructive energy has finally found its purpose. Suho tears through the goblins like a hurricane of precise blows. The system announces a level up and the weight limits of his telekinesis. He seizes a goblin by the neck, feeling his brute strength surge. The monster struggles, but death is inevitable in the heir's hands. Suho crushes the enemy's resistance with a punch that makes the ground tremble. Beru watches proudly, witnessing the gleam of the former monarch in the young man. The goblin centurion advances, a far greater threat than the others. He is an elite monster with blood-red, bloodthirsty eyes. Suho glances at his HP and realizes the damage is starting to take its toll. "That hurts," he grumbles, as the centurion cuts him, but the flowing blood only fuels his iron determination. He ignores the pain and lunges at the monster leader. The combat transforms into a frenetic dance of steel and claws. The Centurion attempts a decisive blow with its heavy axe. I feel more alive now than when I was useless. He spins in the air, returning the attack with devastating force. His HP continues to drop, but Suho doesn't retreat a single inch. With half his life remaining, he delivers the final blow to the green giant's chest. Centurion collapses, defeated by the boy's unyielding will. The system glows. You have learned the passive skill, resilience. Suho falls to his knees, exhausted, surrounded by a mountain of corpses. Silence finally returns to the makeshift battlefield. The mission time expires, and Suho receives the system's congratulations. Beru appears, clapping. Incredible! I never doubted you. The reward appears before his eyes, the rune stone of shadow extraction. Beru goes into ecstasy, seeing that the heir will have his own army. Suho notices that his physical defense has now increased by 20%. His wounds close instantly with the level-up bonus. It seems I was born with a shadowy silver spoon, he quips. He crushes the rune stone, feeling the knowledge flow into his mind. A powerful black aura begins to emanate from his hands. Beru explains that he can now transform the dead into loyal soldiers. Suho asks if it's some kind of necromancy, already strategizing for his next hunt. He extends his hand over the fallen centurion's body. The system requests a specific voice command to activate the ability. Suho ponders for a moment, searching for something that sounds imperative and powerful. The command must be direct, he decides with a dark gaze. Mana begins to swirl around the monster's corpse. Shadows stir, responding to the call of their new master. Suho takes a deep breath and unleashes the command, arise. Darkness engulfs the body, and something new begins to take shape. A black, ethereal hand emerges from the depths of the cracked earth. 3 shadow goblins materialize, ready to serve the monarch. Suho observes his creations, fascinated by the power of extraction. He finds the soldiers somewhat small and less impressive than he expected. Beru explains that newly extracted shadows are usually weaker than they were in life. Suho discovers they will disappear within a day, which enrages him. Beru tries to calm him, explaining that his intelligence will affect their duration. It's all right, Beru. Don't be sad for me. Suho says, resigned. Suddenly, his stomach rumbles. The hunger after the battle is unbearable. Using the key, he decides to leave the dungeon to find real food. Back at the hospital, the aroma of food smells like the best thing in the world. I never knew hospital food could taste this good. Beru warns that Suho now has 3 crucial missions ahead of him. The first is to protect Earth from the monsters coming from outer space. He needs to hunt and grow strong, exactly as his father did in the past. The second mission is to find his mother, Hain, no matter the cost. The third mission is the one that most excites the small shadow insect. Beru wants to regain his true power and cease being a mere grunt. For that, he needs to consume the mana and knowledge of powerful enemies. Suho understands that everything leads to the same place. He needs to enter dungeons. The world outside continues its flow, oblivious to the imminent danger. But to legally enter portals, he needs a hunter's license. He goes to the association to measure his magical energy level. Suho wonders if he'll be classified as an S rank right off the bat. The clerk looks at the display and announces, "Your level is 46. You are E rank." A bucket of cold water splashes Suho, who cannot believe the result. He walks through the streets, feeling small before the towering skyscrapers. The contrast between his hidden power and his official ranking bothers him. Beru tries to console him, but Suho can only think of his current weakness. How can an E rank save the world? He asks, frustrated. Raid groups rarely hire such low-level hunters for expeditions. He suddenly stops as an idea clicks into place for entering portals. There's a loophole in the system that allows him to enter as support. While attack groups fight, other teams do the dirty work. The collection team cleans up the remains of defeated monsters along the way, and the mining team extracts valuable resources from the depths of the dungeon. Suho decides to start from the bottom to gain access to dangerous areas. He appears equipped and sweaty, after a grueling day of manual labor. Suho thanks the veteran who recommended him for that mining position. It's Lim Dog-yun, a university assistant who is also an E rank. Suho is happy to have someone he knows nearby in this new environment. "Hey Suho," the senior calls out, a tone of regret in his voice. He apologizes for running away and leaving Suho alone at the university. Dog-yun recalls the panic of seeing the monsters and his own cowardice. "Don't worry, you just followed the association's rules," Suho says. "The directive for E ranks is always to flee from danger as quickly as possible." Dog-yun is shocked to learn that Suho's mana is even lower than his own. He finds it impossible, remembering the boy's courage on the rooftop. In the senior's mind, the image of Suho facing beasts doesn't match an E rank. He wonders if he saw wrong, or if the boy is hiding something. Beru appears, floating, and agrees that the little monarch is extraordinary. Dog-yun nearly jumps in fright as he notices the shadowy creature beside Suho. "A magic beast!" he screams, in utter panic. Beru complains that Suho is as weak as a larva and needs constant protection. Suho pretends to be a summoner, a common excuse for his strange pet. Dog-yun boasts about having a running ability for quick escapes. "So that's why you're so good at running away, senior," Suho jokes. Dog-yun gets depressed by the joke. While Beru laughs at his humiliation, Suho observes the dungeon's interior, feeling a different energy in the air. He wonders if the ahead attack group has already cleared everything. In the dark, a wolf is struck down by a fast and silent spear. The hunters complain that the dungeon seems empty and unprofitable. Wolves don't yield good essence stones, and their work is in vain. Suddenly, one of the hunters points to a hidden side path. The group decides to investigate, hoping to find something that will save the day. They enter a vast underground hall full of ancient ruins. The magic sensor detects no monsters, which is very strange. One of them suggests there might be a hidden treasure in place of the boss. The lantern light reveals something shining in the center of the stone pedestal. "Damn, there really was a treasure," the leader exclaims. A legendary sword is embedded there, emanating a sinister red aura. But what they don't know is that such treasures never come without a deadly price. "Stand back! I'm pulling this thing out!" shouts Kim Yong-jun, ignoring the mortal danger. An ally warns that such treasures usually have traps, but the rank C tank thinks he's invincible. He grabs the sword's hilt, and the air around him suddenly becomes heavy. What is this?" He feels something wrong, too late to let go. Dark energy explodes from the depths of the stone pedestal. The ground cracks as crimson power begins to consume everything around it. Glowing eyes emerge from the total darkness that forms in the room. Yongjun's hand trembles, but he seems stuck to the cursed blade by force. The red glow climbs his arm like a living, hungry poison. He lets out a sigh of relief, thinking he escaped that strange energy unharmed. "How dare you?" His voice changes to a demonic, hoarse tone. His face contorts into a brutal grimace, losing all human traces. His ally recoils, pale, seeing his teeth grow monstrously. Blood and dark mist fill the entire environment in seconds. Kim Yong-jun is now just an empty shell possessed by ancient evil. Who dares covet the monarch of Fang's sword? His presence crushes the courage of anyone who dares to look directly. He commands the immediate massacre of all intruders in that sacred domain. The order that leaves his mouth is a death sentence. Kill. The monster advances with a bloodlust that no one there can stop. Panic spreads among the remaining hunters in the grand ancient hall. Screams of agony echo as the crimson blade tears through air and flesh. It's the beginning of a bloody nightmare with no visible escape route. Suho watches the chaos from afar and realizes the previous group's fatal mistake. The other miners are shocked to see Suho's shadow goblins. They've never seen a summoner bring forth so many creatures at once. Beru floats beside him, proud of his young king's rapid progress. Suho notes that shadow extraction is still limited, but highly effective. Beru grumbles about being used for silly tasks like carrying rocks and mining. The veterans think the rookie is just trying to show off too much to the group, but Suho's real goal here is to restore Beru's full power. He asks if crystal fragments serve as food for the little shadow. Since you're not helping with the mining, eat the mana remnants on the floor. Beru begins to devour the magical fragments with a strange and rapid voracity. Suddenly, the ant freezes and warns of a powerful presence approaching. It's not Suho's father, but another very dangerous and hostile monarch. A strong scent of wild beast fills the entire narrow tunnel. The sound of hungry growls echoes through the damp walls of the dark dungeon. Swift shadows move across the ceiling, encircling the distracted mining group. A miner screams in terror upon seeing red eyes gleaming in the deep darkness. Magical beasts appeared out of nowhere in an area that should have been completely safe. Despair grips everyone, and a frantic scramble begins with no clear direction. A massive wolf leaps toward veteran Lim Dogyun's neck. Its metallic fangs gleam, ready to tear out his life in seconds. The veteran closes his eyes tightly, accepting that his end has come. "Save me," he whispers in a final, desperate plea for help. Suho appears like a blue lightning bolt, blocking the fatal attack with absolute precision. The wolf is sent flying with a kick that shatters bones and rocks. Suho warns that he will hold off the monsters, and tells everyone to leave now. Dogyun thanks him and flees as fast as his tired legs allow. Suho's gaze glows an intense, deadly blue at that moment. He identifies them as steel fang lichens, dangerous rank D beasts. Alone, he knows he can slaughter all these dogs without much help, but a female hunter decides to stay and fight alongside the brave boy. Suho accepts the reinforcement and orders his goblins to protect the veteran Hyung. He accesses his inventory and pulls out the weapons he stored in the previous dungeon. The goblin swords are far better than any old miner's tool. The real combat begins, and Suho's speed here is simply astonishing. He cuts down the first lichen before the beast can even let out a growl. The monster's black blood stains the cold, damp cave floor. More wolves try to surround the young man, but he moves too fast. Every one of Suho's blows is lethal, focused solely on eliminating the target quickly. The system notifies him of the beast's deaths one after another in quick succession. Suho feels his power grow and his level rise in the midst of the fight. He tears through the monster horde as if merely in training. The blue light of mana cuts through the darkness in violent, swift flashes. The wolves leap together, but Suho dodges with cold, superhuman agility. Beru watches in awe as his master wields the authority of the ruler with perfection. Suho plans to create an army of wolves as soon as his mana allows. He positions himself for the final phase of this necessary dungeon clear. Another beast falls lifeless before the young hero's sharp blade. Arise. Suho's command now makes the earth tremble slightly. The wolf that just died rises as a loyal shadow. The huntress watches, petrified, unable to believe Suho's shadowy power. The system announces that Suho has leveled up yet again today. He repeats the command, and the shadowy army begins to take real form. She finally realizes that this boy is far beyond an E rank. Suho tries to act normal, but his true power radiates from all sides. She suspects he's a fake ranker, hiding his true strength. The atmosphere abruptly shifts as a new system message appears on screen. An urgent quest appears. Defeat the true boss of this area right now. A heavy presence walks towards them, emerging from the deepest shadows. Suho feels a pressure that makes his instincts scream of imminent danger. The monster sees the humans merely as easy prey in its ancient territory. Dogyun thinks the elite has arrived to save the day for all of them. Suho warns that this being is no longer the man they knew. The veteran freezes in place, confused by the young man's serious words. Malignant, yellow eyes gleam from behind the visor of the broken helmet. The enemy attacks with a speed no human eye can follow. The blow nearly rips Lim Dogyun's head off right there. Suho yells for the wolf team to counterattack with everything they've got. The possessed monster roars and charges for the complete extermination of the small group. Suho realizes yet another hunter has been consumed by the cursed dungeon today. Its name glows blood red, possessed Lycan's Fang. Red names mean any mistake here will cost them their lives. Beru warns that it's strong, but hasn't reached monarch level yet. That's all Suho needed to hear to go on the offensive. The system gave him the quest because the hero now possesses the necessary potential. He needs to win to grow stronger and find his lost family soon. The monster swings its red sword, creating brutal and lethal shockwaves. The impact cracks the stone floor as if it were made of paper. Suho slides across the ground, evading death by mere inches. The beast gives him no room to even consider a strategy. Beru encourages the young king to unleash all his hidden power. "I'll take down this red name and evolve right here, now or never." The battle reaches a level of destruction that shakes the entire underground cavern. Mana sparks fly as blades clash with extreme violence. The Shadow Knight attacks with blind fury and endless bloodlust. Suho strategically retreats, searching for a weak point in the enemy's heavy armor. The enemy seems to ignore all damage, relentlessly pushing forward. Suho focuses on his determination to surpass his limits with every exchanged blow. Beru watches in absolute silence, feeling pride swell for his master. Young Suho never retreats, no matter how great the opponent is today. Even while still forming, the aura of a sovereign already clearly emanates from him. The Cursord is the true body of this monster now before him. The Shadow Knight lets out a scream that freezes the soul of anyone who hears it. He prepares a devastating attack to end the fight once and for all. Suho summons 4 Shadow Wolves to serve as a quick and dangerous distraction. The beasts attack the giant's legs, trying to delay its deadly advance. Beru explains that shadows are immortal as long as Suho still has mana left. The true power of the Shadow Army begins to reveal its terrifying face. One of the wolves bites the monster's arm with all its might. The enemy rages and violently hurls the shadows against the nearby walls. Suho notices his mana reserves are now reaching critical limits. The crimson blade glows intensely for the possessed beast's final strike. "A worm like you doesn't deserve the power of the sacred shadows." Beru is enraged by the mockery and responds with a sharp, deadly scream. The monster realizes too late that Suho carries the true blood of the monarch. He recognizes the hero as the mortal enemy of the monarch of Fangs himself. An ancient hatred is rekindled in that instant between the two powerful fighters. Suho smiles defiantly and asks if round 2 starts now. The clash between them causes the dungeon ceiling to slowly begin collapsing. The enemy blocks everything with ease, proving to truly be a superior rank. Suho decides it's time to change the game with a new tactic. The Shadow Knight prepares a slash that promises to cleave the room in half. Suho resolves to defeat this monster using only numerical superiority. He orders his goblins to attack the blind spots of that heavy black armor. The plan is to surround the giant and leave no time for any reaction. Beru recalls that this talent for rulership had been within him since he was very young. But the monster is too swift and easily cuts down the shadow miners. The red sword is a constant threat that Suho must always avoid. A goblin is pulverized with a single simple movement from the possessed beast. The difference in brute strength is still a giant chasm between the two. Suho bites his lips hard, trying to find a way out of this fight. Another attack strikes his summons, draining the precious mana he has left. The goblin dagger shatters upon hitting the knight's black steel. Without useful weapons, Suho seems to finally be against the wall in the final fight. Any foolish mistake now, and death will be the only certainty. "Will you flee now like a scared, powerless coward?" the monster mocks. Speaking ill of Suho's parents was the trigger the beast misfired. Rage explodes within the hero, but he remains focused and calm. Suho asks why his power from before is still half blocked. Beru explains that the seal was made to protect his still fragile body. Everything that happened in the tower was just a grand test of skill. The experience there served to teach Suho to fight purely on instinct. He remembers his best style was always to use his bare fists. Shadows can change physical form if their master wishes it now. Suho has a brilliant idea: to transform the physical bodies of his loyal shadows. He uses the awakening command on the Shadow Wolves again. The monster cackles loudly, thinking the boy is merely repeating old mistakes. It dives in for a final attack that promises to end Suho's life. The Shadow Wolf leaps towards the young hero's right hand. A radiant blue light begins to fuse the shadow directly with his arm. The mana molds into a simply incredible metallic and shadowy structure. The enemy freezes for a split second upon seeing that sudden transformation. The Lycan's shadow now becomes an integral part of Suho's body. The beast's claws are now natural extensions of the focused young man's fingers. The steel-fanged Lycan has become Suho's ultimate combat weapon. A combat gauntlet emerges, ready to crush any physical barrier. Now the brawl will finally be fair, with nowhere to run. Suho shoots forward like a projectile, striking the knight's chest head-on. Beru is ecstatic, witnessing his young master's absurd tactical genius. Transforming soldiers into weapons is something that defies all combat logic. Suho learned an advanced level of shadow authority without any external help. His battle instinct is something that even frightens the seasoned Beru. The monster is hurled backward by the brute force of the charged punch. The true war for survival in this dungeon has only truly just begun. Suho charges with all his might, and the impact against the steel-fanged lichen makes the surrounding air vibrate. The monster recoils as Beru's voice echoes with pure ecstasy at the display of power. "Oh my king!" Suho's strike shatters the beast's defense, opening a definitive breach in the enemy's mana armor. The young hunter moves like a blur, giving no chance for any counterattack from the creature that once seemed invincible. The lichen lets out a roar of despair, realizing that the young man's strength now overwhelmingly surpasses its own. The ground beneath the monster's feet shatters as it struggles to stay upright against the absurd pressure of the attack. Dark energy overflows from Suho's arm, engulfing what remains of the possessed opponent's will to fight. An explosion of blue light and deep shadows engulfs the battlefield, signaling the imminent end of the brutal confrontation. Fragments of shattered weapons fly everywhere as the raw power of the Shadow Monarch manifests. Beru watches every move with pride, whispering about the royal lineage now awakening with full force. The young monarch. With a final mana-charged punch, Suho breaks through the lichen's resistance and ends the threat once and for all. The enemy's body crashes heavily to the dungeon floor as the red glow in its eyes slowly fades. Suho takes a deep breath and feels the adrenaline subside, looking at his own hands, which now carry a much greater destiny. Silence returns to reign in the cavern, interrupted only by the system's notification of absolute victory over the enemy. Suho admits the opponent was dangerous for being a red name, but Beru quickly starts fawning. "I never doubted the victory." The young man smiles sideways, realizing he's learned a new way to fight, making this experience harvest extremely valuable. He decides to check the system rewards and clicks the confirmation button that now shines brightly before him. Suho gains the active skill Storm Slash and is euphoric, as it was exactly the kind of offensive power he desired. With a determined look, he prepares to test his new toy. "Let's take this for a spin." The young man draws his weapon and feels the wind's energy merge with the metal, creating an aura of pure destruction. Suddenly, the fallen sword on the ground begins to speak, lamenting its humiliating defeat. To lose to the blood of the Shadow Monarch, the spirit within the blade roars with hatred, warning that it's not over yet and that it still thirsts for blood. Suho glares at the cursed weapon with contempt and remarks on how human greed has no limits whatsoever. The sword retorts, saying that the moment he holds it, his own greed will swallow him whole and without mercy. Without showing a shred of fear, Suho reaches out to dominate the tool the monster previously used in that battle. A sinister red aura tries to repel the young man's touch, but Suho's will is like a steel barrier. He grips the weapon's hilt tightly, and the system's glow confirms that the item now belongs to him. A message appears on screen, informing him that he obtained Raken's Fang, a legendary and very dangerous weapon. Suho examines the blade and notices that it is far superior to any goblin weapon he had ever used before. The system reveals the blessing of the great sorcerer Kandiaru, which grants the young man a healthy, robust body and permanent longevity effects. With the new sword in hand, Suho feels the weight of power and the responsibility of wielding a sentient weapon. He makes a swift motion in the air, and the sound of the slash tears through the dungeon's silence like distant thunder. The system notifies that the Storm Slash skill has been successfully activated, draining a good amount of the young man's mana. The attack creates a shockwave that pulverizes the surrounding rocks, proving that its destructive power is simply absurd. Suho notes that the mana cost is high but likes the result, while Beru continues to praise shadow extraction. Nearby, the brown-haired hunter begins to regain consciousness and lets out a low groan of pain and confusion. Suho approaches with a calm smile and asks if the veteran is okay. Ah, Hyung, you finally woke up? The man panics upon seeing the bodies around, but Suho reassures him, saying he'll explain everything at the exit. They walk towards the portal, while other survivors watch the young hunter with a mixture of fear and profound gratitude. Suho announces that he will search the rest of the dungeon for more survivors, letting the group proceed to external safety. The veteran remains thoughtful, unable to understand how an E-rank hunter with summoning abilities could be so terrifyingly strong. He looks back one last time, seeing Suho's silhouette disappear into the dungeon's darkness like a true predator. Outside, the rescue teams are in utter shock that Suho managed to save so many people all by himself. But deep within the dungeon, countless wolf-like beasts still prowl the dark passages, ready to ambush anyone. Suho wastes no time, commencing a brutal sweep of the remaining monsters, his new sword slicing through them like paper. Baru reminds his master that every single kill is accumulated experience, and not a single shred of it can be wasted inside. Amidst the frenzied combat, Suho notices something odd about his new weapon, and questions why its attack power suddenly plummeted. The Rakan's Fang sword arrogantly replies, stating it has absolutely no interest in cooperating with the blood of shadows. The spirit within the blade calls Suho's tactics disgraceful, but the young man retorts that hunting easy prey is simply smart. Baru intervenes, stating that his master has already defeated a stronger opponent, leaving the sword speechless in the face of such direct logic. They finally arrive at an area teeming with magical crystals and ancient metallic structures, seemingly guarding millennia-old secrets. Suho treads upon the stone floor, sensing that the very air within is far heavier, dense with mana. A sinister red light illuminates the far end of the chamber, revealing what appears to be the pulsating heart of that mysterious dungeon. Ancient warriors' bodies are strewn across the ground, a silent warning of the immense danger lurking in these abyssal depths. Suho keeps his gaze fixed on his objective, utterly ignoring the crushing pressure attempting to make his knees buckle from exhaustion or fear. He observes the fallen hunters on the ground and comments with a voice heavy with sorrow that all of them lost their lives. The Rakan's Fang sword declares it merely killed the invaders, stating its mission is to protect the monarch's sanctuary. Irritated by the weapon's ceaseless chatter, Suho forcefully thrusts it into the ground and commands it to remain absolutely silent. The system then displays a floating window, informing him that shadow extraction can be used on those fallen targets. Suho is taken aback and asks if the shadow extraction ability also works on humans, not just monsters. Beru confirms that any corpse can be transformed into a loyal soldier, regardless of what race it belonged to in life. The young man gazes at his outstretched hand, hesitating for a second as the shadows of the dead begin to thrum under his command. Dark mana begins to snake through the bodies, ready to rip out their souls and transform them into eternal servants of the young monarch. To Beru's absolute astonishment, Suho retracts his hand, deciding not to perform the extraction on those human warriors. He explains that forcing people to fight, even after death, would simply be another form of overly cruel punishment. Baru falls silent, impressed by his master's moral compass, while the Rakan's Fang sword calmly observes everything. The blood-soaked, debris-strewn floor serves as a grim reminder of the sacrifice made by those men who simply tried to fulfill their professional duty. Suho asks about the connection between this sanctuary and the Itarim, the otherworldly invaders who threaten the universe's balance. Beru explains that the Itarim are the current enemies, while the monarchs were the opponents from his great king's past. He solemnly reveals, "Your father, the great Sung Jin Woo, is the king of the dead and the current shadow monarch." The Shadow Ant continues the list, mentioning the king of beasts and the queen of insects, masters of incomprehensible and lethal powers. He cites the monarch of iron body, the monarch of white flames, and the monarch of frost, all leaders of distinct monstrous races. Suho discovers that his father confronted and defeated the other 8 monarchs all by himself when they attempted to invade and destroy Earth. The Rakan's Fang sword confirms that the Shadow Monarch was the enemy who killed its master, the Monarch of Fangs. The weapon snarls, stating that if it were at full power, it would have torn Suho to shreds and thrown the boy to the wolves. Suho remains calm and says he understands the sword's feelings, as both sides fought to protect what they cherished. He acknowledges that his father fought for Earth, while the sword merely wanted to protect its sanctuary against greedy external invaders. The young man lowers himself, staring closely at the blade, displaying a maturity far beyond his tender age. He questions if it isn't foolish to act with hostility against him, given that his father was the one who defeated their former master. Suho reveals his true objective. I want to see my parents again, and I will use any power necessary to achieve that grand goal. He proposes an alliance, stating that if the sword aids him, he will help protect this sanctuary against the Itarim invasion. The sword's spirit falls into deep thought over the proposition of forming a united front between the shadows and the wild fangs. Suho extends his hand once more and directly asks what the weapon decides regarding this mutual cooperation of interests. Destiny is sealed right then and there, as two ancient powers agree to walk together to confront the threat from beyond the stars. The monarch of Fang's energy begins to flow more harmoniously into Suho's body through the blade. Meanwhile, the world outside the dungeon continues its normal course, utterly unaware of the monumental forces now stirring. In a sunlit city cafe, people chat peacefully, completely oblivious that an interdimensional war is knocking at their very doorstep. Reporters approach Lim Dog-yun, eager for details about the Rank D team massacre that occurred the day before in that dungeon. Dog-yun takes a sip of coffee and decides to tell everything, wanting to ensure Suho receives the recognition he truly deserves for the rescue. He thinks this is the perfect chance to repay the life debt he owes to the young man who saved him. Soon, articles emerge, detailing how a Rank E hunter rescued everyone alone, facing magical beasts with absurd, heroic courage. At the headquarters of a major guild, managers read the news and realize they need to recruit new porters for upcoming incursions. The management team of the Black Turtle Guild discusses the urgent need to hire more low-rank hunters for basic support. Lee Young-ho sends an interesting candidate's profile to his superior, asking what he thinks of this promising new talent. The manager reads about the E-rank hunter who evacuated a mining team and carried injured hunters while fighting lethal monsters alone. He's shocked to see it's only an E-rank hunter and realizes that hiring this guy would generate incredible headlines for the guild. They begin to see Suho as a rising hero who could bring immense prestige and money to the group in the coming months. Without wasting a moment, they decide to contact Sung Suho immediately to offer him a contract he supposedly couldn't refuse. But the answer isn't what they expected, and the assistant stutters, informing them that the young man declined the invitation. The manager roars in disbelief that a rookie dared to refuse a chance to join one of the country's largest and wealthiest guilds. Suho made it clear he has no plans to join any guild for now, preferring to maintain his complete freedom of action. The executives deem him arrogant, believing he'll soon realize how difficult it is to survive in this world without the backing of a major organization. At home, Suho lets out a sigh of relief as he gazes at the pile of non-stop offer notifications. He remarks to Baru that he's been swamped with job offers ever since returning from that perilous mining dungeon. Baru says many covet his talent, but Suho notes that everyone only wants to hire him as a porter or item collector. He decides that joining a guild would only hinder his growth through the unique leveling system he now possesses. With a resolute flick, he dismisses the messages and focuses on what truly matters to grow stronger in no time. The young man turns his attention back to Rakan's Fang, eager to continue the conversation about the sanctuary and the monarch's secrets. He asks again what the sword thinks of the proposal to join forces against the invaders coming from beyond. The sword's spirit admits that forming a united front between Shadow and Fang is the most logical choice for survival. Suho prepares for the next step, feeling that every choice is leading him closer to finding his missing family. The sword grumbles about the young man's audacious manner, but deep down, it respects the unwavering determination shining in Sung Suho's eyes. However, the spirit imposes a final condition for their cooperation to be absolute and free from any future betrayal. Suho listens intently, knowing that earning the trust of such an ancient entity won't be an easy or quick task. The condition is that Suho proves his worth by protecting what remains of the original sanctuary, now threatened by outside forces. The young man asks if the sword knows how to reach the sanctuary, and it guarantees it can locate the place no matter the distance. It warns that the original portal has vanished, what humans call a dungeon break, spreading danger across the surrounding region. Suho concludes that the place has transformed into a field dungeon, an open area infested with monsters and devoid of physical barriers. The system explains that these areas emerge when an abandoned portal breaks, and creatures permanently dominate the surrounding terrain. He sends a message to his uncle, informing him he'll be away for a while and that he shouldn't worry. Equipped and ready for action, Suho asks if they can depart immediately for the location where the sanctuary has manifested. Upon reaching their destination, Suho questions if this is truly the place, observing a grim and desolate landscape under the night sky. He notes that the situation is complicated, as the location is illegally occupied by a hunter guild with a sinister reputation. The young man knows that trespassing is a crime, but the hyena guild is notoriously composed solely of bandits and ruffians. Baru advises his master to focus on leveling up to increase his power before engaging in direct conflict. The ant asks what he's planning, as it sees the fierce gleam of determination and mana surging across Suho's face. The young man simply tells his servant to prepare, for they will enter that place no matter what, right now. He assures them that there's a way for everything and that the corrupt guild won't pose a problem to his current plans. Suho clenches his fist tightly, and blue energy begins to envelop his hand, ready to destroy any electronic obstacle in his path. With a swift movement, he obliterates the security cameras, ensuring there's no visual evidence of his clandestine entry into the premises. He quips that without evidence, there's no crime, while the sword notes how his hesitation has completely vanished, reminiscent of the ancient monarch. The young man presses the accelerator on his invasion, moving through the shadows with the agility of a predatory feline in the dead of night. He asks if field dungeons usually have so much fog, feeling a strange chill run down his spine at that exact moment. The sword explains that this fog is magic from outer space, used to shatter dimensional barriers and create rifts between worlds. Gigantic creatures from other dimensions are tearing through the fabric of reality to send invasion forces to Earth right now. Suho asks if it will take long for the strongest to arrive, wanting to know how much time he has to adequately prepare for war. With the answers in hand, he decides it's time to begin his true training and clears the path with absolute determination. A horde of monstrous beasts and apes emerges from the darkness, surrounding the young man with hungry gazes and sharp teeth ready to tear. Among them is the Razor Claw Brawler, a swift creature leading the initial assault against the human invader. Another monster, the Razan of Black Shadows, roars loudly, summoning more allies to encircle Suho from all possible sides. Suho grins and declares that the time has finally come to unleash his true power, while the sword admires the young man's courage. He surprises everyone by stating he won't be using Rakan's Fang as his primary weapon in this specific combat. The young man reveals he's already devised a new fighting style, focused on versatility and the strategic use of his shadows. He returns to the basics he learned in the tutorial, using swift and precise movements to strike the vital points of the advancing beasts. Wielding the authority of the ruler, Suho gains mid to long-range support, manipulating the battlefield with his powerful mind. He combines the use of different weapons and shadows to create controlled chaos that completely disorients the monsters around him. The Storm Slash skill is activated once more, creating a whirlwind of cuts that slices through the magical simians in mere seconds. Suho obtains new tools through shadow extraction, solidifying his new combat style as something unique and utterly lethal. Beru watches the performance and exclaims that it's simply exceptional, seeing his master's infinite growth potential now. Even the proud sword admits that this truly is the power of one who carries the direct lineage of the Shadow Monarch. Suho realizes that the more enemies he faces, the stronger he becomes by utilizing the souls of those he has defeated. An explosion of shadowy energy marks the end of yet another wave of monsters. As the young man absorbs the mana of the fallen, He notices that he can now control up to 5 shadow soldiers simultaneously after strategically boosting his intelligence attributes. Beru begins to compare this to the millions of soldiers of the former king, but Suho tells him to shut up and focus. Night falls, and the forest silence is broken only by the wind whistling through the trees of that field dungeon. Suho finally finds the central point of the area and announces that they have arrived at the destination they've been searching for since nightfall. There lies the portal that leads directly to the hidden sanctuary, guarded by a structure that seems out of place in time and space. He notices there are still people around even at this late hour, commenting that some will do anything to make a living, but something is wrong, and he wonders why these hunters would be operating precisely at night, the most dangerous time. He observes from afar a group of suspicious men near a pickup truck, acting cautiously and far too tense for normal hunters. The focus shifts to the vehicle's wheels, which appear too heavy, indicating that the cargo they carry isn't just basic equipment. Suho's eyes widen as he notices the strange movements and senses that something terrible is unfolding right before his very eyes. He sees armed men surrounding a group of defenseless people and realizes the situation is far more serious than he imagined. A woman is tied up and blindfolded, being intimidated by a muscular man who seems to revel in her suffering. Suho asks Beru if he is truly witnessing a human trafficking scene within a field dungeon area. Beru confirms it and advises caution, as they are already trespassing, and attracting extra attention could be very problematic. But the young man cannot ignore the crime, and the sword notices the abrupt shift in the aura emanating from Suho's body. The spirit of the blade senses that the young monarch's bloodlust has awakened, and justice will soon be served. Suho remembers the stories of his father, a violent crime detective, and his grandfather, a legendary and heroic firefighter. The 21-year-old, who grew up admiring these examples of courage, will not stand idly by and watch this atrocity. The criminal's leader senses an odd presence and glances around, but Suho is already moving through the shadows. The silhouette of the young monarch appears like a specter of death, advancing against the bandits with a cold and meticulously calculated fury. One of the men on the ground lets out a gasp of surprise before being struck by a blow he didn't even see coming. Suho appears before them with a gaze that promises only pain for those who dare profit from the misery and suffering of others. The criminals fall one by one, while the survivors look at the young man as if he were an avenging angel sent from heaven. He steps on the fallen enemy and makes it clear that the reign of terror of that corrupt guild ends today, and it ends now. With his sword gleaming and shadows rising around him, Suho begins a necessary massacre to cleanse that sacred sanctuary. Suho stares at the last standing criminal with a blood-chilling gaze, and justice begins to be served. The young man advances with the calm of a predator who already knows the hunt's end, while the enemy recoils. The bandit screams in pure panic. "Who the hell are you?" And Suho realizes his body is acting on instinct. He questions the crime of invading foreign territory and prepares for what must be done next with unwavering resolve. Kaisel's shadow manifests as a trail of blue destruction that cuts through the air and illuminates the entire room. The impact of the energy shatters the floor and makes the dungeon walls vibrate with the young monarch's absurd power. Suho snarls that kidnapping people and putting them in danger is a sin he will not let go unpunished. The hyena members scream desperately, asking who he is, but the answer comes in the form of a swift and deadly attack. He moves like a blur among his enemies, who can barely keep up with the speed of his precise and lethal movements. Suho analyzes that his opponents are merely rank D, and decides to control his strength so as not to destroy everything around him. Every blow he delivers fells an opponent, and the sound of bones breaking echoes throughout the dark warehouse. The merciless slaughter continues as the criminals beg for lives they themselves never respected during their horrific crimes. Suho spins in the air and strikes the vital point of another soldier of the corrupt guild with incredible surgical precision. The last man falls, and silence returns to reign in the place, leaving only the scent of sweat and fear in the air. Beru observes the scene from the shadows and proudly whispers, "Young monarch, admiring his new master's constant growth. The ant wonders if Suho has already surpassed the level of these humans, whom the world calls D-rank awakeners, so quickly. The shadow soldier exclaims, deeply moved, that he is profoundly touched by the display of power he just witnessed on the field. Suho puts away his weapon and mutters to himself that the fight was too easy, feeling he still needs greater challenges. He surveys the piled bodies on the ground and focuses his attention on what truly matters, saving the people trapped in that facility. Beru approaches and praises his sovereign's clean finish as Suho's blue aura slowly begins to dissipate. The hostages tremble and thank him for the help, asking if he's from the Hunter Association, but Suho merely tells them to agree. He orders everyone to flee to a safe place while he finishes investigating the reason behind those bizarre kidnappings. Suho looks to the back of the warehouse and wonders why the Hyena Guild was doing this to innocent, defenseless civilians. Beru suddenly stops and says he can sense something strange coming from behind those heavy, rusty metal doors. The sword spirit points in a specific direction and states that the reason they came is right up ahead. Suho walks down the shadowy corridor with Beru floating beside him, keeping his senses alert for any traps that might emerge. He arrives before a reinforced door and feels a shiver down his spine as he perceives the sinister energy emanating from it. Upon opening the gate, Suho is shocked by what he sees and can barely believe the level of human cruelty. The place looks like a torture chamber filled with cages and medical instruments used for dark experiments on living beings and humans. Beru trembles and identifies a faint energy he knows very well from past eras of celestial wars and ancient monarchs. Suho advances and sees a small cage in the corner of the room where something is sprawled on the cold, blood-stained floor. He asks if the criminals have stooped to trapping even a puppy in such a deplorable and painful situation. Beru immediately corrects his master and reveals that this small creature is no mere puppy. It is something far more important. That wolf pup is the descendant of the king of beasts, the monarch of beasts. The ant reveals in utter shock. He explains that after losing the war against the shadow monarch, the ancient king sent his heir to this isolated sanctuary. The plan was to keep the lineage alive in the hope that a new sovereign of beasts might emerge in the distant future. Beru notes that the lineage hangs by a thread and that the ancient king's wish was simply to prevent its complete extinction. The pup's energy is almost gone, and if they don't act now, the last royal blood of the beasts will fade away. The ant asks what the young monarch intends to do, and Suho hesitates for a second before the weight of this bombshell revelation. Suddenly, a loud sound interrupts the moment, and Suho turns quickly, sensing an overwhelming presence emanating from the deepest shadows. A deep voice echoes, saying it thought only cowards remained, but it seems there's still one meddlesome human left to kill. Suho's eyes widen as he sees the sheer size of the threat revealing itself before him with pure killing intent. A gigantic, muscular monster appears, cursing the Hyena Guild and asserting that humans were never truly trustworthy. Beru screams the beast's name, Brokey, you're still alive? And Suho realizes the enemy is a legend. Brokey laughs maniacally and recognizes the Rakan's fang sword, asking if the living blade also survived the ancient massacre. The sword vibrates with fury and roars that Brokey should be protecting the descendant instead of betraying his own kind like this. Suho assumes a combat stance, realizing that Brokey is no ordinary monster he can defeat effortlessly. The beast lets out a deafening growl and asks what kind of human trash dares to face an elite warrior of the fangs. In a blink of an eye, Brokey vanishes and reappears in front of Suho with a speed that defies the laws of physics. The young man barely has time to react, thinking how fast that monster is as he hastily tries to raise his guard. The impact of the first blow expels the air from Suho's lungs and violently throws him against the wall. Brokey continues the relentless assault, and the sheer brute force of his fists cracks the reinforced concrete of the secret facility. Blood splatters across the floor as Suho tries to dodge a sequence of attacks aimed at tearing his head off right now. The young monarch rolls across the floor, trying to find an opening, but the pressure exerted by Brokey is simply suffocating and relentless. Each movement of the beast creates shockwaves that destroy the surrounding cages and intensify the chaos within that room. Suho feels his ribs creak and realizes that his mana armor is starting to fail under the weight of the enemy's attack. He tries to counterattack with Rakan's Fang, but Brokey blocks the blade with his bare arms as if it were paper. Baru cries out desperately for his master and tries to intervene, but Suho orders him to stay out of it for now, to learn. An explosion of smoke and debris covers the area, and it seems Suho's end is closer than ever. Suho wipes the blood from his face and admits that this was the strongest blow he'd ever received in his entire life. His head is spinning, and he tells Baru to stop yelling because the noise is making his throbbing pain worse. Baru warns that he sensed a familiar energy coming from Brokey, something that explains how he became so strong and perverse. The name that makes the universe tremble is pronounced Itarim. The energy of the outer gods is corrupting the beast's soul. The sword questions how Brokey dares to touch the monarch's descendant, and he laughs, asking how they think he maintained his power. He reveals that without the original sanctuary, he had to seek cruel and forbidden means to avoid weakening and dying. The law of the jungle says only the strong survive, and the weak serve only as nourishment, Brokey declares maliciously. He points to the wolf pup and says that even though it's weak, its royal blood is the perfect source. Suho realizes with horror that Brokey was literally devouring the prince himself to steal the lineage's power. Brokey confesses that he periodically consumes the monarch's blood, and Rakan's Fang vibrates with a hatred that makes the steel sing. The monster mocks the sword, saying it's just a broken relic that can do nothing against the new king. Brokey's hand is enveloped in a dark, purple energy that smells of death and destruction from the void. He proclaims himself the only strong one left, and the true successor, who must carry the title of Monarch of Fangs. The beast lunges for the final blow, but something changes in the air, and a cold pressure begins to emanate from Suho's body. Brokey stops his attack midway, feeling an instinctive danger he can't explain just by looking at the human. The shadows around Suho begin to stretch and come alive, responding to the young monarch's silent fury. Suho's gaze has completely changed, and now he shines with the cold, ruthless light of a true sovereign of shadows. The wolf pup lets out a low whimper, and Suho feels the connection of suffering between the two wounded souls there. A black and blue aura explodes from Suho, throwing debris away as he rises from the shattered ground. He stares at Brokey and says that the time for excuses is over, and that the traitor's execution will begin this instant. The sword notices the change and shouts Suho's name, sensing that its master has awakened something long dormant. Suho tells the wolf pup that its rage is righteous, and that they will take care of this bastard together now. This is the first alliance between the shadows and the fangs against true evil, Suho proclaims with authority. Brokey growls, annoyed, calling Suho an insignificant insect and swearing he will rip out the boy's heart before he blinks. The Shadow Monarch's symbol glows on Suho's chest, and he solemnly declares that Brokey will die by his hands. The sword spirit watches in silence and feels that history is being written before its war-weary eyes. The small wolf raises its head, and its eyes gleam with a flicker of hope upon seeing the human's courage. Suho lunges forward, and the entire dungeon seems to tremble under the weight of his first step towards the enemy. Shadows mold around his sword, creating a blade of pure darkness that cuts through reality itself. He murmurs Brokey's name with a disdain that makes the beast recoil for a brief, humiliating second of fear. Suho realizes that the guild's name came from this monster, and understands that the Itarim's influence is spread throughout the world. The survivors plead for freedom in the background, and Brokey gets irritated by the noise, attempting to attack them to silence everyone for good. Suho blocks the way and says that Brokey will not touch anyone else while he is still breathing in that cursed place. He swears he won't stand by and watch this atrocity and charges with a blow that rips through the air like thunder. Brokey tries to retaliate, but Suho is faster now, moving as if he were in several places at once in the room. The steel of Rakan's Fang finally cuts through the beast's tough hide, and a roar of genuine pain escapes Brokey's throat. The monster looks at the wound in disbelief, and rage takes over him, transforming him into a mass of muscles and blind fury. Brokey screams that the weak are mere prey, and that he doesn't need help to crush a worm like Suho here. Suho tightens his grip on the sword and replies that the truly strong protect others, something Brokey will never understand. The clash between the two creates a crater in the center of the room, and dust rises, hiding the beginning of the real massacre. Suho unleashes a sequence of rapid slashes that leave trails of blue light in the air and mark the traitor's body. Brokey tries to grab Suho, but the boy slips through his fingers as if made of smoke and pure shadows. "You killed innocent people just for fun?" Suho questions as he lands a mana-charged punch to the beast's face. Brokey replies that the power of life and death belongs to the strong and that he does as he pleases with the weak. Suho says that this monster's mentality is exactly why he will erase Brokey's existence from this world. The fight escalates to a level of total destruction, and the dungeon ceiling begins to collapse under the pressure of the energies. Sweat runs down Suho's face, but his focus remains unshaken. Every movement is calculated to inflict maximum damage. He uses the shadows to bind Brokey's feet to the ground for a second, and seizes the opportunity to deliver a precise blow. Brokey screams and tries to break free, using his brute strength, but Suho keeps pressing with a will that seems infinite and divine. The monster realizes that the human is getting stronger. With each minute the battle extends and falls into despair. Suho channels all his hatred and mana into the tip of his sword, preparing his most destructive technique to end this fight now. Brokey leaps back, trying to gain distance, but Suho is already in the air above him like a shadowy angel of death. The beast attempts one last desperate attack, unleashing red energy claws that cut through everything they touch on their way to Suho. The young monarch dodges in mid-air with superhuman agility and prepares the blow that will decide the fate of the royal lineage. The energy around the sword becomes a violent vortex that seems to swallow the room's light and Brokey's fear. The monster looks up and sees Suho's silhouette against the dim light, realizing that his life is about to end. Suho descends like a meteor of shadows, and the air pressure around him causes the ground beneath Brokey to collapse. The two clash with a force that could level an entire city block, and the blinding flash temporarily blinds anyone nearby. Suho's blade cuts through Brokey's defense like butter, striking the beast's chest with fatal precision. Storm cut. Suho's roar echoes as energy explodes from within the enemy's body. Brokey coughs up blood and laughs sickly, saying that even so, the relic of the Monarch of Fangs will weep in shame. The monster still has the strength to push Suho away, and the young man falls heavily, feeling that he has reached his absolute limit of energy. Suho struggles to his feet, declaring that it's not over yet, even as his body screams at him to stop and give up. He shouts for his technique to spin, and Rakan's fang begins to revolve wildly, creating a vacuum of destructive and lethal power. Brokey stares at the blade, asking why the sword's spirit has changed so much after centuries of loyalty to the old king. The traitor questions Rakan's honor, and Suho feels the sword's confusion and pain through their mana connection. Brokey shouts that he never truly respected Rakan, only yielding to his brute force during that time of war. Suho hears his words and realizes that Brokey was never a guardian, merely an opportunist waiting for the right moment to betray everyone. The beast prepares for a suicidal attack, wanting to drag Suho and the wolf pup to hell with him right now. Brokey's body begins to swell with unstable energy, threatening to explode and destroy the entire facility and the hostages. Suho declares he won't allow it and tries to move, but his legs fail and he falls to his knees on the ground. "No, I cannot fail here," he roars, trying to gather every last drop of mana. Brokey scoffs, saying Suho is merely a weak human and that he will die like all the others who tried to stop him. The beast asks if Suho truly believed he could live a hero's life, being so small and insignificant before him. Suho looks at the pup and shouts the lineage's name, feeling that he must save that creature no matter the cost. Brokey attacks, telling Suho he shouldn't worry about others when his own life hangs by a thread. The young man feels his bones almost shattering under the pressure, and the pain is so intense that his vision begins to darken. He thinks of his father, who is fighting somewhere far away, and decides he cannot be the one to fall like this. A new wave of energy surges from the depths of Suho's soul, a force born from his pure desire to protect. His eyes gleam with renewed intensity, and he grips the sword with a strength that defies his own physical exhaustion. "I will not fall here!" Suho's war cry makes the entire dungeon vibrate with the power of shadows. Baru shouts for his young monarch, seeing his aura reach a level he has never witnessed in a human before today. Suddenly, Rakan's fang shatters into 1,000 pieces, and Suho stares at the destroyed blade with profound, silent shock. The sword spirit manifests one last time, saying it understands what needs to be done to save the future. The blade shines with a comforting light, and Suho realizes the sword is bidding him farewell with a gesture of sacrifice. The wolf pup rises and begins to absorb the sword fragments, which float around it like blue shooting stars. The creature is inspired by Suho's fighting spirit, and its body begins to grow and transform. Brokey tries to interrupt the transformation, but Suho blocks his path using only his fists and his iron will. The ant observes in awe, saying that the small wolf has finally found a master worthy of following into the eternity of shadows. The sword spirit whispers that this is the last act it can perform to protect the lineage of its former king. It transfers all the remaining mana from the relic to the wolf, and Suho feels the explosion of power that purifies the air. A blinding light fills the room, and the sound of a powerful beast awakening echoes through the destroyed and grimy concrete walls. Brokey recoils, terrified, seeing that the pup he tortured has now become a formidable warrior ready for revenge. The wolf roars with the force of 10 storms, and its presence crushes Brokey's murderous intent in an instant. Suho smiles, exhausted, seeing that his plan worked and that the fight has now completely shifted in their favor. He falls again, feeling that his mana is completely depleted, and his body collapses onto the debris of the epic and bloody battle. Brokey tries to flee, but the new Shadow Wolf cuts off his path with a speed even the beast couldn't match before. Suho breathes with difficulty, trying to maintain consciousness as he watches the wolf begin its final counterattack against the disgusting traitor. Suho's status window glows red, showing he has only 21 HP remaining in his tired body. Brokey walks towards Suho, wanting to deliver the final blow, but the wolf places itself in front of him like a living shield. The beast screams for Suho to die, but its words are cut short by a powerful bite from the new guardian of the true shadows. Suho curses his weakness, but feels an invisible hand holding him, giving him strength to continue watching the end. The wolf strikes Brokey with a series of attacks that tear the beast's flesh and destroy its corrupted mana armor. Brokey falls to his knees, realizing he has lost everything and that the royal blood he stole is now his own death sentence. Suho looks at the wolf and realizes that the creature is waiting for his command to finish off the enemy once and for all. Brokey begs for mercy, but Suho merely turns his face away, saying that monsters like him deserve nothing but oblivion. The wolf finishes the job with a final blow that silences Brokey forever, cleansing the dungeon of that malignant and traitorous presence. The creature returns to Suho's side and nudges his hand with its snout in a gesture of absolute and eternal loyalty. The young man realizes that the small wolf from before is now a powerful ally who will fight by his side in any battle. A system notification appears before Suho, asking if he wishes to recruit the Fang's descendant into his army. Suho doesn't hesitate and accepts his new comrade, sensing that this union is the beginning of something that will change the world's destiny. He strokes the wolf's head and thanks it for the help, saying that they are now a family united by shadows and blood. The wolf growls softly in agreement, and Suho finally allows himself to close his eyes for a moment to rest from the brutal fight. The system confirms the recruitment, and Baru celebrates the new addition to his beloved and powerful young monarch's army. The shadows calm, and the place returns to being just a silent ruin that holds the secret of that improbable and heroic victory. Brokey is dead, and the lineage of the Monarch of Fangs is saved, thanks to the unwavering courage of an anonymous Ranki hunter. Suho knows that the Itarim are still out there, but now he has another reason to grow strong and protect what remains. He stands up with the wolf's help and walks out of the dungeon, ready to face whatever the future holds. A voice from the past echoes like a funeral lament amidst the ruins, revealing the moment when the war against the Shadow Monarch was lost. Brokey observes the small wolf and growls bitterly, This world follows the law of survival of the fittest, and since we lost, we will lose everything. The beast's gaze is somber as he gives his final advice, ordering the pup to grow strong so that the lineage may prosper. The young wolf looks at its master with devotion, not understanding that this would be the beginning of an endless nightmare. The creature's innocence is crushed by the brutal reality of a destiny it never chose for itself. Suddenly, the scene shifts, and human hunters surround the fallen beast, bringing a threat Brokey never imagined he would face. He stares at the invaders, bleeding and exhausted, and asks with a failing voice, "What are you? Why don't you just kill me?" A white-haired figure smiles maliciously, looking at Brokey as if he were just a valuable, disposable tool. "This one seems to be a useful monster, exactly what I need," says the mysterious woman as she extends her hand to the wolf. She holds a shining, sinister crystal, bringing it close to Brokey's eye as the malevolent energy begins to pulsate violently. The beast's scream of agony tears through the dungeon's silence, marking the beginning of its transformation into a slave of the Itarim. The small wolf watches in horror, seeing its leader transformed into something monstrous and soulless before its eyes. Brokey of the Hyena Guild, from now on your duty is to capture living humans and deliver them to us, the woman decrees. She explains that the object planted in his eye will increase his strength, but the price will be the loss of his own will. Her tone of voice is chilling, making it clear that the power he now wields could become something bizarrely twisted. Red energy consumes Brokey's vision, transforming his deepest desires into an insatiable hunger for destruction and blood. Suho awakens from this visual trance, gasping as he realizes he has just witnessed the true memories of the Fang's descendant. He clenches his teeth, understanding the truth. Those shadowy figures are the real culprits, directly linked to the Itarim's invasion plans. The little wolf didn't want revenge, it merely desperately wished to stop the massacre Brokey was committing in the name of strangers. Suho knows that if this is part of the Outer God's plan, he has a moral obligation to defeat Brokey right now. But fatigue weighs heavily, and he feels that he doesn't yet possess the necessary power to defeat a beast of that level alone. Suddenly, a system window shines before him, revealing an unexpected quest: recruit the monarch's descendants as his new allies. The system announces that a bond skill has been formed, due to the deep connection between Suho and the young heir of the Fangs. Mana begins to swirl around Suho, a pure, bluish energy that seems to respond to the fallen wolf's call. Brokey roars, sensing the change in the air, refusing to accept that this insignificant human still has the strength to fight him. Beru watches in awe, realizing that the young monarch is undergoing a change unlike anything the king ever experienced. Suho doesn't fully understand what's happening, but he feels an overwhelming force coursing through every inch of his tired muscles. "Do you think I'll just stand here and do nothing?" Suho shouts as he lunges into attack with surreal speed. The beast advances with claws ready to tear, but Suho is no longer where the blow was meant to land. The clash between the two energies creates an explosion of light that makes the cavern walls tremble violently under the pressure. Dust rises, and Suho's silhouette begins to change, merging with the wolf's shadow in a mystical process. Brokey's eyes widen as he sees the notification that a new fusion skill has just been activated by the system. Suho's body glows intensely, and his hair begins to take on a white hue like the wolf's own fur. When the light dissipates, his appearance is completely different, emanating a predatory aura that cracks the ground. "This is incredible," Suho whispers, feeling every fiber of his being elevated to a new level of existence. Brokey panics and screams, "What?" This time he absorbed the descendant once and for all? Suho feels his body light as a feather, while his senses become so sharp that he can hear the enemy's heart. He moves like a silver blur, dodging Brokey's blows with an ease that borders on insulting to the beast. "Now's my chance! I can do this!" Suho exclaims, preparing to unleash a counterattack that will decide the outcome of this bloody battle. Brokey cannot keep up with the boy's speed and falls into despair, realizing that his brute strength is no longer enough. He tries to convince himself that such power couldn't possibly come from a pathetic runt like the one he had been torturing. "I cannot lose! If I lose here, I'll lose everything I stole. The monster roars as his corrupted mana explodes. The collision is inevitable, and Suho strikes Brokey with a sequence of blows that tear through the air and the beast's flesh. Baru watches from the shadows, noting that his master's mana continues to surge, fueled by the unwavering will of the royal descendant. Brokey snarls with hatred. I don't know what you did, but I will never lose to an insignificant human like you. He attempts one last desperate attack, asserting that the difference in power between species is what defines who lives. Blame yourself for being human, an inferior species. The werewolf roars as he throws his full weight against the young man. Suho merely watches the incoming attack, his gaze cold and overflowing with absolute, deadly confidence in his new power. The beast's fist descends like a meteor, but Suho intercepts it with his bare hand, generating a devastating shockwave. The ground beneath their feet explodes, but Suho doesn't budge an inch, holding firm against the monster's brute force. Brokey is in absolute shock, unable to comprehend how a human could possess such physical strength without using a weapon. The system confirms the activation of the unarmed combat passive, granting a massive damage bonus for each of Suho's physical blows. Baru appears, floating, and retorts mockingly, "How dare you speak of species differences before the young Shadow Monarch?" Brokey trembles upon hearing that name, realizing too late that nothing in the universe stands above the lineage Suho represents. He realizes that the boy is the direct heir to the power that once defeated his own master in the distant past. With an upward kick that seems to cleave space itself, Suho sends Brokey flying upwards with colossal force. The beast flies uncontrollably, losing all sense of direction as Suho's energy continues to punish its weakened body. The final impact against the dungeon ceiling sounds like thunder, making the entire structure tremble as if it were about to collapse. Suho returns to his normal form, his hair darkening as exhaustion finally begins to take its toll after the immense effort. He takes a deep breath, feeling the heat of battle dissipate as he gazes at the fallen, defeated enemy amidst the rubble. Brokey lies on the ground, gasping and broken, the malevolent energy of the Itarim finally abandoning his shattered body. Stronger, I needed to become stronger, the beast stammers, as death approaches to claim him. The shadow wolf approaches Brokey, growling low as he watches the traitor who stole his family's blood. Brokey's vision begins to darken, and memories of who he used to be before the corruption begin to return. He finally remembers the true reason he craved power. It wasn't to rule, but to protect what he loved. Tears of blood stream down his face as he whispers the name of his former lord, Rakan, in a final act of repentance. I was furious because I couldn't protect you, Brokey says before taking his last breath and turning into smoke. The young wolf gazes at the ashes of his oppressor, feeling that a cycle of pain and suffering has finally ended. Suho approaches his small ally, feeling a profound respect for the courage the little creature displayed throughout the battle. Baru lands beside him and praises, "Young monarch, you were incredible, but now we must take care of what remains." Suho agrees, remembering that Baru sensed the Itarim's energy in Brokey and that he himself saw it in the memories. He reflects on the hunters who implanted the crystal in the beast's eye, questioning if they might be the divine invaders themselves. Baru explains that the outer gods do not act directly, but use apostles to disrupt reality and prepare the way. This means that the Itarim's servants are already on Earth, and Suho knows he needs far more information. If he loses track of these invaders now, the entire world could be caught off guard by the coming chaos. "There's a way for us to get what you want," Baru says, a literal light bulb illuminating above his shadowy head. He explains that by devouring Brokey's corpse, he can absorb his memories and recover mana at the same time. Suho is surprised and asks if he really had such a useful and gruesome ability hidden up his sleeve all this time. The young man looks at the small wolf who helped him, realizing the creature is now alone in the world and without a home. The little wolf lets out a sad whimper, looking at Suho with pleading eyes that overflow with immense, heavy loneliness. Suho kneels and extends his hand with a gentle smile. "Do you want to come with us?" I have the perfect place for you. The creature hesitates for a second, gazing at the human who proved worthy of carrying the Shadow Monarch's legacy. Suddenly, the wolf jumps onto Suho and begins to play, accepting the invitation and sealing an eternal friendship. Suho laughs at his new companion's excitement, feeling that their journey is only truly beginning. Then, I'm counting on you, Baru, Suho says as he opens a dimensional portal to his private dungeon. The small assistant is moved and replies, Young monarch, your words are too kind for a mere servant like me. They cross the portal and emerge into a familiar environment, yet full of mysteries that Suho still needs to fully unravel. Beru asks why they came to the dungeon instead of going home to rest after such an exhausting fight. Suho explains that he wants to find a safe place for the Fang heir to live, and the Shadow Dungeon is the ideal spot. He feels pity for the wolf, who lost both its sanctuary and its guardian, and decides that it will now be a part of his own family. A system alert pops up, asking Suho to name his new teammate, who barks excitedly. Suho looks at the gray fur and decides, since you're gray, your name will be Gray. Beru mutters that Suho's naming sense is as terrible as the former monarch's, but the wolf seems to love it. Suho designates a portion of the dungeon's forest as the territory of Fangs, handing over complete control of that area to Gray. He asks what Gray would eat, and Beru suggests that, due to its royal lineage, it can feed on other monsters and living organisms. That's perfect, Suho says with a sly smile, already planning how to efficiently train his new ally. He notices there are still goblins roaming the dungeon that he hasn't eliminated and decides Gray will handle the cleanup. The wolf wastes no time, darting through the forest like a silver arrow, eager to prove its worth to its new master. It leaps onto the first goblin and slays it with surgical precision, proving that the hunter's instinct runs in its blood. Gray tears through enemies one by one, moving with an agility that even Suho admires from afar. The system begins beeping with kill notifications, showing that the training is yielding far better results than expected. Beru encourages the wolf to keep growing stronger so it can protect the young monarch in future battles. Suho observes Gray's evolution and is satisfied to see how quickly it's adapting to the dungeon's hostile environment. But something different catches Suho's attention on his interface, a change he'd never seen in the system before. Beru, I'm gaining experience from Gray's hunts. Did this system exist before? He asks, confused. Beru explains that it's like an RPG party system, where experience is shared between the monarch and his subordinates. Suho realizes that even though he only gains half the experience, having Gray hunt automatically is an absurd advantage for leveling up. Another status window flashes before him, bringing a new task that appears to be recurring and highly lucrative. It's a daily mission to clear the Shadow Dungeon, requiring him to slay hundreds of goblins and their commanders. Suho concludes that the system wants to transform this place into his permanent territory through these constant missions. He gazes at the vastness of the forest and sighs, wondering how to find so many goblins in such a huge place without wasting time. Inventory, he says, and a floating screen with his items appears, glowing with a technological blue hue. He finds the horn flute he took from a goblin centurion and remembers that it's used to summon subordinates en masse. Suho blows the instrument, and a deep, piercing sound echoes throughout the dungeon, serving as a dinner bell for the monsters. The forest's silence is shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps and screams coming from all directions at once. Dozens of green feet and sharp claws emerge from the bushes, answering the irresistible call of the magical flute. An immense horde of goblins surrounds Suho, believing they'll have an easy meal, but they couldn't be more wrong. Exactly as I thought, Suho exclaims, as Beru praises the strategic intelligence of his beloved young monarch. The young man clenches his fist, and shadow energy begins to concentrate, preparing a devastating area attack. He plunges into the green horde like a hurricane, unleashing blows that send monsters flying. Every punch from Suho explodes a goblin, as he moves with a fluidity that turns the battle into a deadly dance. He shows no mercy, focused on completing the daily mission's kill count as quickly as possible to claim the rewards. The goblins attempt to retreat, but Suho's speed prevents them from even thinking of a safe escape route. The massacre continues, and the forest floor becomes littered with the bodies of invaders who dared to challenge the owner of this place. Goblins have become boring. I need more of them to finish this quickly, Suho says with a look of pure boredom. He blows the flute again, and a new wave of monsters emerges from the depths of the forest, drawn by the mystical sound. The number of enemies is now tripled, forming a veritable green sea that advances against the lone hunter. Suho smiles, thinking that now the real fun will finally begin, with so many targets to practice his skills on. "Arise!" he commands, and the shadows of the fallen begin to bubble on the ground, transforming into his new soldiers. The shadow soldiers advance against the living goblins, creating an internal war within Suho's own dungeon. It's a spectacle of shadows and blood, where Suho commands his small army with natural and absolute authority. Gray also joins the fray, hunting down the goblin commanders attempting to organize the desperate horde's defense. After 3 hours of non-stop combat, the last goblin falls, and silence finally returns to the shadowy forest. The system announces that the daily mission has been successfully completed and asks if he wishes to check the rewards now. Suho remains silent, thoughtful, which prompts Beru to ask if there's a problem with the received rewards. The young man notices that the mission's numbers continue to climb even after its completion, which is extremely strange and suspicious. Could it be, he murmurs, realizing that the system might be hiding a valuable secret behind that count. He decides to continue hunting to see how far the counters go, hoping to unlock something no one else knows about. There really was something hidden here, Suho exclaims as a new, special reward screen shines brightly. He accepts the first prize and feels his fatigue instantly vanish, as if he had just woken from a deep sleep. The second prize is the title of Wolf Slayer and several skill points that he can distribute to become even stronger. Suho looks at the last reward with anticipation, feeling that the system is about to give him something transformative. He has to choose between a blessed box or a cursed box, and decides to risk it on the one that promises what he truly needs. Right now, I need many different things to survive, he reflects as he opens the system's gift. An imposing and terrifying gauntlet emerges from the box, emanating a demonic heat that makes the air around it tremble. The item is called Vulcan's Horn, a weapon made from the remains of a greedy demon that drastically increases his physical damage. Suho places the gauntlet on his right arm and feels the weight of the demonic power adjusting perfectly to his own mana. He invests all his new points into strength, feeling his muscles become even denser and ready for impact. Now I just need to hunt demons to strengthen this weapon even more, he says, but an alert about Gray interrupts him. Beru warns that Gray is not a shadow soldier and needs rest, and Suho agrees, remembering he also has things to resolve outside. He asks about the guild linked to the Hyena Guild case, and Beru confirms the group's name is Grim Reaper. Suho walks out of the portal, already planning where to start his investigation into this suspicious and dangerous organization. His phone rings, and he sees a desperate message from his instructor asking for immediate help at Seoul Station. The scene shifts to the ruins of the station, a danger zone under constant surveillance due to the presence of monsters. Instructor Im appears, waving and deeply thanking Suho for coming so quickly to his call. He explains that the entire collection team simply disappeared and bailed, leaving the work stalled and accumulated. Suho tries to calm the instructor, promising to help with the collection so that the dungeon's schedule isn't jeopardized. Im hands Suho a protective suit, explaining that the collector's job is far more dangerous than it seems at first glance. He details that collectors need to follow the raid team closely to gather materials from newly slain monsters. The suit serves to protect against unexpected ambushes and also against the poisonous spines and sharp scales of the corpses. Suho puts on the suit, understanding the importance of safety in an environment where any carelessness can be fatal. Suddenly, the raid team leader appears shouting, furious at the lack of personnel in the collection team he hired. Instructor Im humbly apologizes, but the man doesn't care and complains about the high price he paid to the Grim Reaper Guild. He threatens to file an official complaint with the association if there are any delays, which would end the instructor's career as a collector. M pleads for his trust, and secretly asks Suho to use his summons to speed up the collection process. Suho observes the group in silence, analyzing the composition of the raid team and the power level of each hunter present. There are several D-ranked hunters and a C-ranked healer who seems to be the arrogant leader who was just shouting. Suho reflects on the coincidence of Vulcan's horn emerging from the cursed box just as he enters a zone controlled by the Grim Reaper. He feels that destiny is moving the pieces for an inevitable confrontation within that desolate urban battlefield. The group enters the station and the atmosphere becomes heavy, with the smell of death and corrupted mana permeating the stale air of the tunnels. Shadows move at the end of the corridor, and Suho knows that the monsters there are not ordinary, carrying something sinister in their aura. A horrifying scream echoes from one of the side rooms, indicating that danger is already much closer than they imagined. Gigantic stone and shadow figures emerge from the darkness, ready to crush any intruder who crosses their path. But what no one noticed was the presence of a hooded figure observing everything from above, awaiting the right moment to reveal the true horror of that dungeon. Now, with a new ally and demonic power in hand, Suho ventures into enemy territory, sensing the heavy air. But what awaits him at Seoul Station is far darker than he imagines. Want to know what happens? Comment below.